Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Cut the Crop. My name's Scott Champion, I'm your host, and today my guest is FAR's Technology Manager Chris Smith. Chris, good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks. You too, Scott.
Look, many growers will have participated in the successful combine harvester setup workshops that you've initiated and organised over the last couple of years, and now we're in the third year of those combine workshops. And there are some findings that have been put together from the current season, from 2025, and these are sort of hot off the press. So Chris is going to be giving us a little bit of background on some things that we've learned and also what's been happening over this last season. So Chris, if we think just about this most recent year, how many growers and crops have been involved in the process?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. We saw overall about 47 different growers and looked at about 179, 180 different crops.
Mm-hmm.
That was from January through to May. So we started off in sort of the South Island looking at small seeds and grains. Then we went up to the North Island and looked at corn and maize in May time, looking at the sort of losses in maize in the maize combines. So it's quite interesting, quite a good array. Most of the work was done in Canterbury, also the Wairarapa and Waikato. So some good results came through.
Yeah. And obviously, Chris, this process over the last few years has been focused on minimising harvest loss. What were the findings in this most recent iteration in terms of harvest loss?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. The standard for the industry is about a 1% loss in grain. And then sort of in small seeds, the GRDC, the Grain Research Corporation in Australia, saying canola losses should be between 2 and 3%, or other small seeds. Pulses, about 0.5% up to 1%. So we had quite a good range. And so a lot of crops, we were sort of lower. But some areas like the ryegrasses and clovers, etc., we were quite a lot higher than the actual industry standards.
Okay.
And barley as well was slightly above the industry standard. It could have been the year. A lot of these things, we had a shocking year last year. There was a lot of wet crops and damp crops. A lot of things came in because they could get them in, not because the conditions are ideal. But it was very interesting to see how much difference and variation there was between the sort of different crops we covered.
Chris, given New Zealand's sort of particular characteristics about intensity, if you like, or yield per unit land area, that being higher than a lot of those other places around the world, is there anything that means in terms of us needing to establish our own benchmarks or how we think about this particular area of harvest loss? Yes,
that's a good point, Scott, because 1% loss to somebody who's growing, say, 5 tons in Australia is pretty minimal, but a 1% loss to somebody who's growing sort of 12 to 15 tons could be $70 or $80 a hectare, which is quite significant when you're doing quite a few hectares. So I tend to look at the cost per hectare rather than the actual percentage loss, because the percentage loss, until you put a figure to it, is still just a percentage. You've still got to try and equate what it is.
Yep.
And to make real management decisions, you really need to know the bottom line, the bottom figure, that you combining that crop, that's what's costing you, or that's what you save by making those adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I know from our previous conversations, you've talked about the importance of measurement and, sort of understanding exactly what losses you are, use of drop trays. Just tell us a little bit about, any further learnings this year or how that message might have been reinforced through this most current season.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good correlation between those who are measuring. It might be a commercial pan, or it could be, like I've said on previous podcasts, people have used beehive lids before, car mats, etc. As long as you measure, that's the most important thing. But what we found was people who were measuring had half the losses of the people who weren't measuring.
Wow.
Which is that can be quite significant. I think in one example, in the actual survey itself, we were saying on 100 hectares of barley, for example, that difference could equate to $7,000 if you're measuring rather than not measuring, just by improvements you're making and quantifying those improvements.
Yeah, so this is quite material, isn't it, in terms of having a real payback by taking that step of measurement?
Absolutely, yes, totally.
And I think your point there about it sort of doesn't really matter what you're measuring with, that the point is to measure rather than not.
Yes, totally. So you really got to measure when crop conditions change, when you
Right.
start off in the morning, when you lunchtime and evening, the crop sort of conditions change throughout the day. When you're going to a different variety, even if you've got a very patchy paddock and some areas are thicker than others, it's worth changing. Just checking what's going out the back because you can complacency can catch you out quite easily. And also, if you think, I might just make a slight adjustment, just drop some pans, see what that adjustment's done. There can be sometimes it can work in your favour, sometimes it can work against you. But if you don't actually know, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, Chris, just how frequently do you need to measure? So thinking about that, has something changed, and therefore, repeating that process, that'd be your key sort of learning or key sort of insight?
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever you make a change, because the conditions and the crops have changed, like I was saying all the time, so you'll have to adjust the combine. If you're changing your fan speed, changing your sieve settings, changing your concave or your rotor speeds, etc., every time you make one of those changes, just see what the impact is, because a lot of the work we've shown is you can increase your speed or you can reduce your rotor speed or something, and it can really work in your favor or it could really work against you. But unless you measure it, you can't differentiate it. And also, when you do make these changes, like I say quite often on the courses as well, go quite extreme and work your way back,
Right?
because otherwise you can take a long time to actually hit the sweet spot.
And in terms of the speed of the combine itself, Chris, do crop losses generally rise with that speed, or is that not so much the case?
No, it's very much a case-by-case situation. We've got examples where we chucked some pans out behind them, their losses were down, they were minimal, about 0.2, 0.3% losses, and in a barley crop, but they're only going 3.8 kilometres an hour. So we sort of got them to go faster and faster, and then we got them up to about 5.4 kilometres an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the losses only increased by $3 or $4 a hectare, but their cost per hour to actually drive the combine dropped significantly, over $100 a hectare.
Right,
so
so
that's
significantly offset.
Totally, yes, a real relationship. You've got to look at your tons per hour, basically. So you look at your ground speed, your yield, multiply that by your front width, divide by 10. And that situation, that grower, he was when we got there, he was doing 27 tons an hour, and then when we left, he was doing 40 tons an hour. And the losses had only gone up about $2 or $3, but obviously his cost per hour had come down because he was going more hectares per hour.
Absolutely. Yeah, great example. Any other sort of, particular grower stories, Chris, or little things you want to share from people who've done this work and the benefit that they've seen through being involved?
There was another grower down in South Canterbury. He was in oilseed rape. He was again, losses are really low, and he was going about 5 kilometres an hour. So his cost per hectare was about $330. And then we got him up to about 8 kilometres an hour. So his cost per hectare to drive the combine was down to about 200.
Wow.
And his actual, in that situation, in his conditions, his actual losses went down to about $31 a hectare as well from the loss out the back of his machine. So by keeping the machine full, he actually reduced his losses from that, just the efficiencies of the machine being full, the wind going in the right directions and everything working well.
Fantastic. Chris, I know that some of the grass seed cleaning companies have been reporting issues with dressing losses, sometimes higher than 20%. Is that something that's can sort of be, considered or addressed through this process?
Absolutely, yeah. We did some work this year. We were talking to some of the companies, McCall Seeds, etc. In fact, they're actually giving out buckets to their growers. It's a very easy thing to do when you're actually combining. If you have a bucket of a known volume, for example, DLF have some grass where they have a 10-litre bucket. If you fill that bucket up to the top, if that bucket seed, on the premise that seed weighs more than the material other than grain, like the broken straw, etc., if you fill that bucket up, if that bucket weighs less than, say, if it weighed about 3.5 kgs, you've got about 10% losses in there, screening losses. But if the bucket only weighs about 1 kg, then you've got about 35% losses. That's a really quick way of actually, when you're going along, just get out, take a scoop out the actual bin, see what's going on, and that helps people as well. We've seen a lot of the samples we looked at that came through dressing plants. think about 50% of the actual losses that were taken out by the screenings were due to short straw, which was less than 30 mils, or empty husks. And those are things that the combine can sort out. If you take them to the seed dressing plant, not only are you having to pay for cartage to get it there, it takes up more volume at obviously at the place as well, and it takes them longer to dress it out. And when they do dress it out, you're getting seed losses because they can't completely not lose seed when they're taking out all the rubbish as well. So all of that comes into play as well. So it's definitely something we're looking to do a bit more this year. We're also looking to do a bit more with red clover this year as well, because we've got some other FAR projects. We want to quantify how much people are losing out the back of their combines, particularly with red clover this year. So if anybody's doing any red clover, please get in touch with me through the usual courses, and we'll come out and see you and do some measuring if you're not measuring yourself.
Fantastic. Chris, look, anything else, any other final messages you'd want to share?
Yes, the WhatsApp groups, if you're not on them and you're combining, please get in touch again with me and get yourself on there. Already the groups are working. People are giving each other settings for different machines and different conditions and different crops. It's a really, really useful forum, and it's growers talking to growers, helping each other out, even selling parts to each other or lending parts to each other. And also I'd like to say, more than happy to come out and spend a morning with you, etc., just quantifying your losses with you, make adjustments and see where we can improve your output of your machine.
Fantastic, Chris. Well, look, if you are listening to this and you're interested in doing that, you're not sure how to get in contact with Chris, contact us here at the FAR office and we can connect you, or drop Chris an email and, make contact and take up that opportunity if you think that's something that would be worthwhile for your farming business. Chris, thanks so much for this conversation just now. I've been talking to Chris Smith, who is the technology manager here at FAR, and he's been talking about some of the outcomes from the latest round of combine harvester workshops that have been conducted. So, Chris, great to see you again. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Scott.
And to all our listeners, have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.